I like to go to experts, and one of the experts that we've picked out is Quentin Brogdon. Quentin Brogdon has been named the Best Lawyers in America list multiple times. He's distinguished himself among the best attorneys in the nation. In addition, he has the honor of being included in Texas Monthly's Super Lawyers list every year since its first publication, and he's been named one of Texas Monthly's top 100 super lawyers in Texas. He lectures to other lawyers and gives speeches. He's very active in the profession of law, but gives back of himself, and he's an extremely successful attorney and has agreed to join us now to talk about it. Mr. Brogdon, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on, John. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad. I look at myself. I'm not a very, let's say, attractive target. I'm a radio guy, so I get a few hits now and then. But then you look at a guy with bottomless pockets like Donald Trump. Doesn't he become kind of a target of frivolous stuff as well as perhaps valid lawsuits?
Sure. There's no question he's a target by virtue of the wealth he's accumulated, number one. He's been litigious. He's not only been sued, but he's sued. There have been over 70 cases filed involving him, about half that he filed and about half filed against him just since one count was since June of 2015. So the amount of litigation, lawsuits he's involved in is unprecedented. We've had other presidents have suits involving things that happened before they were president, but the law basically says the lawsuits can go forward. And the problem is he's got a country to run, and he can get bogged down pretty easily in lawsuits. They take a lot of time and a lot of money, not only to settle if you're going to settle them, but to pay the lawyers if you're going to fight them.
We're talking with Quentin Brogdon, a very prominent Texas attorney, about Donald Trump's lawsuits. Now, I know that one of your jobs. My dad was an attorney, by the way. He was a defense and personal injury, and then he went into prosecution and became a prosecutor, and then went on to become a judge. And he's no longer with us. But occasionally I say things about attorneys from the inside. I hope you'll take it. Don't take it personally. It just comes from years of being around.
There won't be much I haven't heard. Trust me.
That I can believe. But part of your job, Quentin Brogdon, in handling somebody's personal injury case, or in any case where you're working, suing somebody, is to bedevil the person you're suing. If I'm not mistaken, keep the paperwork flowing and never let there be a dull moment. And if I had somebody like you on my tail, I don't think I'd be real happy. Donald Trump's probably got 5-6 dozen after him. Does that actually play on their mind during the daily performance of their duties?
You're talking about the lawyers? Do the lawyers think about
No, not the lawyers. The
strategy?
The target of the strategy.
Sure. I wish I could tell you that never happens, that there aren't lawyers out there who deliberately pursue a strategy of trying to be a pain in the posterior to the company or the person they've sued. That's not supposed to happen. These cases, for instance, the Trump University cases, they don't appear to be frivolous cases, but whether you love Donald Trump or you hate him or you fall somewhere in between, there's a bigger thing at work here, and it's the balance and separation of powers. He's got to run a country. We can't have him having to stop and give all these depositions, and there's a balance. No one's above the law, but on the other hand, you can't just dismiss these cases. So some of them may get put off for a period of time. Some of them may not have to have his personal involvement. But going forward, what he does as president, for things he does as president, basically those are the actions of the United States, and the government's lawyers will deal with those suits if there are any. But for things before, technically, the United States Supreme Court ruled in that Clinton case with Paula Jones, he can still be on the hook technically, and the trick is finding a balance.
How do you find that balance? Who's responsible for finding it?
It's a case-by-case basis, and in this case, for instance, there were mentions of him. If it had gone to trial, the Trump University case, it was set for trial November 28th. Trump's attorneys had wanted that put off until after the inauguration. The lawyers for the students, on the other hand, were arguing, these cases have been around 5 or 6 years. I think it was 6 years, and we shouldn't have to wait anymore. And it was a balance. The judge said, why don't you guys, and he persuaded pretty strongly on this point, sit down and try to settle the case. And that's ultimately what Trump did. He settled the case. He had said he wouldn't, but he settled it. And in his defense, maybe he had, points he needed and wanted to make, but he has to go run a country now. And he and his lawyers decided, and his advisors, that it was best to settle.
But now, if there are other cases out there that cannot be postponed, he can be forced to give a deposition or to face other questioning, can he not?
Absolutely. And the judge can do special things, such as perhaps letting him appear by video link, by letting the deposition occur, even at the White House or in a nearby location, and not necessarily requiring him to come to trial. The judge can put off trial. So the judge in each case has the discretion to make the ruling. And some of these cases involve his corporations. And just because you fall in a Walmart, for example, doesn't mean you get to necessarily take the deposition of the president of the Walmart. So he has to have some special knowledge or be pushed personally on the hook before technically he should be able to have to be personally involved.
In your estimation, is this something that we should be worried about, or do you think this is going to play out to the advantage of the country?
I think, based on almost 30 years of being in the system, I was a criminal prosecutor. I was a defense lawyer who defended corporations and doctors and nurses. And then for the last, almost 20 years now, I've represented people who are suing. Many more times than not, the jurors and the judges get it right. Not always. I wish I could tell you it's 100%. But I think, on balance, what needs to happen happens. And in this case, a settlement occurred. Donald Trump tweeted that, he didn't really want to do this. It was a fraction of what, they were asking for. It really was about 60% of what they were asking for, what the Attorney General was. But many more times than not, it works out the way it should. Common sense prevails. And I think going forward, more probably than not, this is going to shake itself out. A lot of these are going to go away. He has some of this in his control. He threatened to sue the dozen women who accused him of sexual assault. If I was his lawyer, I'd say do not do that, because that's going to bog you down in lawsuits. They're going to countersue you. You're going to have to testify in those cases. That would not be a good idea. So he can take some actions to minimize this and hopefully start tamping some of these things down so he can get on with running the country.
Well, Quentin Brogdon, you've been very interesting, and I'm really glad that we had you on as an expert witness, as it were. And now that I've got your number, you'll be talking to us again. And I appreciate, once again, your being with us.
Thank you for the invitation, John. I appreciate the conversation today. Take care.
Great. You do the same. And happy Thanksgiving.